The House remains without a speaker as of now. Republicans again meeting behind closed doors for hours to try to find consensus, not only about a speaker, but if there's a temporary solution to pass legislation in the meantime. NTD's Melina Wisecup reports from Capitol Hill. So, Melina, Republican nominee Jim Jordan says he's not backing down. Tell us more about where we stand at this point.
Well, Steve, that is the case, but unfortunately, we still are at a standstill at this moment. We're in the exact same position, essentially, that we were in on Friday, where Jordan is the elected nominee. He is willing to move forward to the House floor for a third vote. However, it's unclear when that will happen, and it's unclear if Republicans, the holdouts who were against him, if they will actually flip and join him. That's exactly what Jordan's trying to figure out right now. But, Steve, in some sense, we're at an even worse position that we were in back last Friday, because not only could Republicans not agree on if Jordan should continue to take this race for the speakership, but also they couldn't agree on whether or not to pass that resolution to expand the temporary speaker's powers, which we'll get into a little bit later. But first, we want to show you what Jordan had to tell reporters after leaving that hours-long closed-door session. Republicans were leaving frustrated. We'll show you what he said, along with one of those holdout votes that are still to this moment against Jordan.
We made the pitch to members on the resolution as a way to lower the temperature and get back to work. We decided that wasn't where we're going to go. I'm still running for speaker, and I plan to go to the floor and get the votes and win this race. But I want to go talk with a few of my colleagues. Particularly, I want to talk with the 20 individuals who voted against me so that we can move forward and begin to work for the American people.
Anything at this point that Jordan could do that would change your mind?
Very hard. And there's never a never, but it would be really, really hard for him to.
So that last congressman you just heard from, Steve, he has been very vocal against opposing Jordan from the very beginning. Of course, he's saying he's not movable at this point, and that's what Jordan's trying to work towards. And that's the big question for him. Are any of these 20 movable? He needs to secure almost all of them to flip their votes for this next ballot, or else he will lose again. Because remember, Republicans are in a slim majority. He can only afford to lose 4 votes. Steve?
So, Melina, the resolution to empower the temp speaker, we just heard Jordan refer to in that clip there. Some were trying to push a vote on this as early as today. Where do things stand now?
Well, yeah, that's what took up a large part of the discussion behind closed doors today, too. Should Republicans go ahead and push for this temporary solution so that they can at least get some legislative action moving while they continue to hash out whether or not they want to have Jordan as a speaker or throw somebody else in the race? But the fact of the matter is, even just passing this resolution is a very dicey topic for Republicans. Here's what some of them told us leaving this hours-long meeting today about this temporary solution.
You could tell there were key disagreements, and our members, I think rightly, do not want to take a resolution like that to the floor. If something like that goes to the floor, you have to have unanimous support from our conference. It is not there.
I wouldn't say quite dead. We didn't vote, so we don't know. Speaker McCarthy also stood up and said that this was the right way to move forward. We are at a standstill. It's like if we're digging a hole and you keep hitting rock, like dig in a different place. We can't keep doing what we've been doing. So I support it.
I'm leaving conference after several hours to go eat lunch because I don't think we're going to get anything resolved.
So clearly, Steve, there is not a consensus within the Republican Party about whether or not to bring this motion to the floor. However, some Republicans are even floating the idea of working with Democrats to pass this resolution, and they want to force it through as a privileged resolution, which would enable them to take it to the floor without anybody calling it up. So that's something we will be keeping an eye on as this develops throughout the rest of this week. Steve?
NTD's Melina Wisecup. Great reporting there from the Capitol. Thank you, Melina. And after 2 failed ballots for Representative Jim Jordan, where will the bid for the House Speaker go from here? But first, recent drone attacks on U.S. troops in Iraq and Syria. Joining us now is Florida Republican Congressman Greg Steube. Congressman Greg Steube, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Congressman, I want to get your thoughts here. Drone attacks on American soldiers in Iraq and at the border of Iraq and Syria in Syria. I'm sure this hits a bit closer to home to you as a Iraq war veteran. How alarming is this considering what is already taking place in the Middle East?
Yeah, I can guarantee you those are Iranian-backed militia units that are attacking our service members. And again, this is the Iran that the Biden administration just opened up $6 billion worth of payments. Myself and my colleagues on the Republican side have asked them to try to freeze that money, but they also lifted sanctions. So now Iran can sell rockets and drones and all sorts of that kind of stuff out on the free market because this administration, who cares nothing about the safety and security of the American people, lifted sanctions on the Iranian regime. So it's not a coincidence that these things are happening. It's not a coincidence that weeks after they released $6 billion, that these attacks from Hamas, who are backed by the Iranians in Israel, none of this is a coincidence. This is all because of the horrible foreign policy decisions of this president and his administration.
A lot of interesting points, Congressman. All roads do appear to be leading back to Iran, but yet with very little fanfare. You're mentioning it, of course. How should Iran be dealt with right now?
Well, we shouldn't have, the Biden administration shouldn't have lifted sanctions on them. We should reinstitute those sanctions. They should refreeze that $6 billion so the Iranians don't have $6 billion to use to fund terrorist activities in the Middle East and across the globe. Those are just a few short things that you could do. Take strong stances against the Palestinians supporting Hamas instead of this president who's now saying he wants to give them $100 million of Americans' taxpayer dollars that you know darn well is going to go to fund Hamas's war against Israel. We're giving money to Lebanon that's funding Hezbollah. We're giving money to the Iraqis that's funding Shia militia groups that are backed by the Iranians. All of this, we are in the current state of wars all across our world because of the Biden administration. This would not be happening under a Trump administration, an administration that exuded strength, America First agenda. But they know, just look at Afghanistan, what this administration is going to do. They have an appeasement regime in the Biden administration to try to appease terrorists, appease the Palestinians supporting Hamas, appease the Iranians, and an appeasement strategy in foreign policy does not work. And you're seeing the complete implications of that on the world stage right now.
Congressman, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about the House speakership. What can we expect right now? Can you give us any insight as to how you see this playing out?
Well, it sounds now that the quote-unquote leadership of our party has decided to pass a resolution on the floor that would empower McHenry, who is the Speaker pro tem right now, with the powers of the speakership without actually going through a speaker election. I think that is woefully unconstitutional. I think it would be a horrible idea to move forward with that. You would have a speaker acting with speaker powers who hasn't been elected speaker. I anticipate to vote against this. I would imagine that the majority of my conference is going to vote against this. So the only way that this limps across the finish line would be if Democrats are going to join establishment Republicans to empower a speaker and give him powers that he should not have because he hasn't been elected speaker.
Do you see a point where some of these Republican holdouts, the established ones that you mentioned, sort of become or start to be considered the extremists that those on the other end of your party have been called?
Well, I mean, they're dug in. I mean, they're not going to support Jim Jordan. I know Jim wants to do this to give McHenry time and us to be able to pass legislation until January to give him time to try to work some of these individuals. I don't think that's ever going to happen. Scalise didn't have the votes on the floor. Unless the 8 that ousted McCarthy, 5 of them changed their position. There's not votes for Kevin on the floor. There's not votes for Jordan on the floor. So either we need to come to an agreement on who's going to stand in the place for the next year and a half and actually lead the conference conservatively and be elected speaker and not change the rules and empower a speaker that's never been elected to that position.
Congressman Greg Steube, really appreciate you joining us, giving us some insight directly into this situation. Thank you.
Yeah, good to see you.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.